Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thanks for downloading another episode of Wigs for Wigs. I'm Joe Cook, joined once again by Bill Venezia, and we have a couple other guests joining us today. We have, once again, Dr. Michael Buxbaum, who joined us for our last episode, and we're hoping to be joined again today by the Judge Eddie DeFazio, who we're hoping will hop on the Zoom with us any moment now. But we're here to talk a little bit about the fallout from last week, when Donald Trump was found guilty of 34 felonies in a New York state criminal trial for falsifying business records in the furtherance of his election by paying hush money to Stormy Daniels. But first of all, Bill, Dr. Buxbaum, how are you doing today?
Good, Joe. Good.
Yeah.
Bill, you want to?
Well, it's funny.
Thoughts?
What I did was I took a look at polling, and when you poll Donald Trump, I think it's a real difficulty. Polls don't exactly reflect what his support is or what his non-support is. But anyway, for whatever it's worth, there were polls taken last week prior to his conviction from the Wednesday through the Friday, which included some of the time from most of these polls. It's interesting because the one that kind of made the most sense in the way they did it was the NBC News poll. And it basically would categorize, you had a vote, you had basically a say when they polled you, are you less likely, more likely, or there'd be no difference in who you were going to vote for. Mm-hmm. So in doing that poll, they sampled the GOP, the Democrats, and they sampled the independents, and then they put them all together. In the all together category, less likely to vote was at 24%. More likely to vote was at 19%. And no difference was about 57%. Now you have to look at the breakdowns to the different parties. In the Republican Party, less likely to vote was 11%, 34% more likely to vote for, and 55% said no difference. Obviously, when you take a look at the Dems, it was 38% less likely. 37% more likely, 58% basically no difference, and independence was the key in this.
Probably the most important is independence. So what did they say in this poll?
Yeah, I mean, you can almost throw out the Democratic and the Republican, but the independents were at 26% less likely to vote, 16% more likely, and 58% said no difference. But 26% in a close election, because the polling right now looks like 42% for Biden and an aggregate of the polls that I looked at and 40% for Trump. So you got a close election, period. I also, the caveat is it's early. I don't know how, again, I don't know if I trust the validity of these. So many factors can interfere with this, given the state of the economy, given the state of what's going on in Gaza.
That's also including 8 to 10% of people saying they're going to vote for Robert Kennedy Jr. right now. And will those people actually vote for Robert Kennedy Jr. or at the end, are they going to vote for either Trump or Biden? Which,
not correct me if I'm wrong. He's not on every ballot in every state.
Oh, he's struggling to get on the ballot in different states. And that's one of the obstacles to him joining the debates, is that CNN has set a rule that you have to qualify for the ballot in a certain number of states to be on the stage for the debate. And he hasn't met that requirement yet. So, which she just mentioned, we are recording this on the anniversary of the assassination of his father, Robert Kennedy Sr.
I woke up to that news at Hudson Catholic when I was where I was going to school. Michael, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that when you talk about how the trial will impact the election, basically, I believe the election will be decided only in, let's say, 7 states by the independent voters. Yeah. So very small percentage of the electorate. Now, the question is going to be, how many of these voters are going to say, well, we are not going to vote for a convicted felon? And how many will say, the guy was framed, it was kind of a judicial way of getting rid of someone who is a threat to the current president, and we will vote for him as a protest vote. Now, I live in Pennsylvania, and I'm part of a book club. And one thing which was both interesting and funny, one of the other members of the book club, we started talking about, this particular issue. And he told me that he's actually now, he wasn't sure what was going to do, but now he will vote for Trump because he feels that Trump has been kind of targeted by the Democrats. And one thing which he said, which was very funny to me, he said, I know that Trump is an a-hole, but he's my a-hole.
You hear that kind of thing a lot from people who vote for Donald Trump.
He gives license to people to be an a-hole because he is one. They identify with that, I would assume.
The thing is, a lot of the people who might feel that way, that this trial maybe wasn't a major deal, maybe it was some kind of, let's just go after Donald Trump. I don't hear too many of them actually take the step of saying, I don't think Trump actually committed the crime that he was convicted of, right? It's more, I don't think this case should have been brought against him because he's Donald Trump, and not, I don't think he did what the jury just found him guilty of.
Well, I have somewhat of a different point of view because, first of all, that case was initially looked at by Cyrus Vance, who was the previous, and he decided it's not worth going after. It was looked at by the Department of Justice. They didn't feel that it was worth going after. Then you had Alvin Bragg, who ran on the platform of Get Trump, just as did Letitia James. And they took something which would have been a misdemeanor. They amplified it to 34 felony charges for one thing. The reason it's 34 is because they wrote 34 separate checks for the same quote unquote crime. So they try to amplify it. The next thing which I'm concerned about is that they kind of concocted, like through a new legal theory, the idea that even though the statute of limitation expired, that somehow it was connected to him intending to commit another crime. So the judge's instructions were very vague, and a lot of these legal analysts, and I would be interested in what Mr. DeFazio might say, kind of could not even understand what the crime was, because the instruction was saying, well, as long as you feel that he intended to commit another crime based on those false records, then it's okay, without even specifying any other. And then the other issue was
specifically, I'm hoping that Judge DeFazio will be able to join us.
If I could just finish one more point. The other thing is the judge was a Democrat. He contributed to Joe Biden $25, but nevertheless, he obviously prefers the Democrats. And he certain things he did, which are certainly reasons for appeal, such as not allowing this guy Brad Smith to testify that giving Josh money is illegal. And allegedly, he also said at the beginning of the trial, he also said, he turned to the defense and said, are you ready? And then he turned to the prosecution and he said, are we ready? So as a psychiatrist, that sort of shows if he actually said it, because I didn't see him saying it, it's just people reported he said it, that sort of shows what goes in your mind. So the question is, would that type of a situation occur to somebody who was not Donald Trump? And also, are we trying to disqualify potential opponents through judicial means? And this could be only a prelude to the future, where, let's say, the Republicans could go and start fishing for crimes in Democrats who are running for office.
Mike, can I just jump in there at that point? Just to go back to where the origin of this case was. The origin of this case lied with the Justice Department of Donald Trump. His then Attorney General brought the charges against Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was found guilty. And if you remember, co-conspirator number one, unnamed, was Donald Trump. Now, again, the federal court. But not only did Michael Cohen, was he convicted and found guilty and basically sentenced to jail time where he did serve. And then when he was released to his own recognizance in his house, he got pulled out around the holidays and put back into Rikers Island. So I have to tell you that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Now, I think a jury of Donald Trump's peers found that they believed Michael Cohen. And by the way, when the government has witnesses like Michael Cohen, they're not angels, they're not saints, but I think they believed in his contrition in terms of he had served his time. So when you look at it that way, how was justice served by not convicting Donald Trump?
Well, I would say this. I would say that Michael Cohen was not convicted of falsifying records. He was convicted of perjury. So that was a different charge. And
all right, just 1 second. I think Ed is in the waiting room.
Sure.
Joe, if you want to let him in.
I just did. He's joining now.
Okay.
So. Good morning, Judge. Can you hear us?
Eddie, he's coming. That little blue light is on in the corner of his. Anyway, I'm sorry, Mike, you were talking.
No, well, Michael Cohen was convicted of perjury, not of this particular crime. So that would be, my retort, that his conviction was not that. And as far as the jury goes, the unfortunate system in America is that it depends where the jury pool is. For example, if this case was tried in, let's say, Louisiana, in a red state with a Republican judge, it would have probably come out very differently. So in Manhattan, you have, 85% of people are Democrats. So when you say jury of your peers, that's not, juries differ depending on the jury pool. And, I'm a doctor, so doctors are sued for malpractice. And it's a well-known fact that if you get sued, let's say in a city like Philadelphia, your chances of being found guilty or being found liable in this case are far higher than if you are sued in the suburbs or in the rural type of areas, just because the jury pools tend to be different. And also the rewards tend to be much higher in the city than in the suburbs.
The thing
Well,
about-
I
the thing
guess
about all of that I have trouble with is that I get that part, that Manhattan was a very unfriendly jury pool for Donald Trump. But the case that I've heard Donald Trump's lawyers and supporters making on TV about why this is unfair is that everybody in Manhattan had a preconceived opinion about Donald Trump, and that's why they couldn't get a fair trial in Manhattan. They should have gotten it somewhere else. Where is this imaginary somewhere else that people don't have a preconceived opinion about Donald Trump? So it's the way that they've been framing it, at least in their public messaging, that only Manhattanites have some kind of predetermined opinion about Donald Trump, and everywhere else out there, everybody would be more fair because nobody has a preconceived notion about Donald Trump, except in this evil island of Manhattan.
Well,
It's where it's a disconnect for me. I understand that there would be friendlier places for a jury pool than Manhattan for Donald Trump, but that's not the way they've been framing it in their public messaging. They've been saying it's because people in Manhattan already know Donald Trump. They know too much about him. They've formed their opinions about him, and therefore it couldn't be fair there. Where are you taking this trial that's not the case? I mean, that's the part I don't understand.
Well, I would say you are right that everybody has opinion of Donald Trump, but it depends what opinion. So in Manhattan, they will generally have negative opinion about him.
Right.
But let's say if you were sued in a small town in Mississippi, they may have a favorable opinion.
Right,
about
exactly.
So, and in San Francisco, they will have a negative opinion about him. So it all depends on, unfortunately, even though justice should be blind, unfortunately it's not, because a lot of things depend, and lawyers themselves like to bring cases in places which is good to their point of view. So, you
Well,
know,
we've seen that even in Donald Trump's other case, the documents case. I'm starting to wonder if Jack Smith regrets not trying to bring it either in Washington, D.C. or even in New Jersey for the documents potentially having brought to Bedminster occasionally, because what they got was this judge, Eileen Cannon, who seems very sympathetic to Donald Trump, to put it mildly.
exactly.
And that case is not progressing anywhere. And that seems like actually the most straightforward in terms of legal theory and everything. There's no novel legal theory with that one. That seems like the most straightforward case, and it's going nowhere because it's been slow walked by this judge. And speaking of judges, I just want to see if Judge DeFazio is able to hear us, because he is signed on and his sound is on.
Okay.
I am on. I apologize for being late, but I am on, and I have been listening to the last few minutes.
So, Judge, we were wondering, because we were talking just before you were able to sign on, about maybe some possible avenues for appeal for Donald Trump, maybe some elements of potential bias on the part of the judge, the fact that he didn't say in his instructions that you needed to find a specific second crime that the falsification of the documents was in the furtherance of, which is what elevated it to a felony. And I'm just curious about your thoughts, especially given your legal background, on what potential successful avenues for Donald Trump to appeal might be, or if you don't see any potential successful avenue.
Well, both of those issues that you mentioned, Joe, are, I believe, viable appellate issues. Now, I'm not in any way indicating that the defense will necessarily prevail, but those are viable issues. Now, the bias of the judge, I don't think that issue has merit. It certainly will be raised, but based on those minuscule contributions that were made, I think that's more of a de minimis situation. Now, as an aside, in New Jersey, you would never have that issue because judges are strictly prohibited from making any type of political contribution, as are prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case in New York because you have an elected system, and that's really in my opinion, a problem. But that's getting a little off point. Now, as far as the charging in this case, I think it was always a somewhat innovative theory to raise the level of the crime from misdemeanor to felony by this stacking, let us say, procedure. Now, I'm not saying that is wrong, but certainly on appeal, that's going to be the issue.
Yeah, is it not at least peculiar that they didn't need to agree on what that second crime was that they were in furtherance of? It was just kind of generally, as long as you feel it was in the furtherance of another crime, you can find him guilty. I mean, wouldn't you normally want to specifically say what statute that other crime is?
Well, see, I don't know for sure in the state of New York whether that's required. I saw something over the weekend. I saw Cyrus Vance the former district attorney in New York, interviewed, and he seemed to indicate in New York that under their procedure, you would not have to do that. And he used an analogy to the burglary statute in New York, where if you enter a premises with the intent to commit a crime therein, the jury does not have to find by a unanimous verdict what that crime is. Now, if that's the case, this verdict would be upheld, but I don't know. But I think it's a legitimate issue. So.
And what are the courts of appeal in this case? Where does the Trump the defense attorney has to go to file an appeal? How does this, what's this the structure for those appeals?
It's similar to New Jersey. You have an intermediate level of appellate court where it would go to a panel of 3 appellate judges, and then ultimately, in this case, I'm sure it will go to the New York Court of Appeals, which is, in fact, the Supreme Court of the state of New York. So that's the way it would proceed.
Ultimately, could it go to the Supreme Court?
I don't know. That's a very good question. I actually have heard people who are Trump supporters saying that it should go
Immediately. That's what I heard.
Immediately to the Supreme Court, but I don't think that that's possible. I don't think that that's in fact the case at all. These are state appellate issues. This is all based on state statutes. And I don't believe that this case would be taken up by the federal appeals courts. So I think that that's another, that's kind of a misleading type of statement as well.
Well, it was made by Jim Jordan, so he was the one that wanted it to basically be that.
Once again, somebody I thought allegedly believed in states' rights, trying to get the federal government involved in a state decision on things.
Well, that's unfortunately what we've seen happen with a number of issues.
Yeah.
Supreme Court's waded into this already in the way of putting a finger on the scale with the immunity question. And it's going to be interesting to see how long it takes them to make a decision on that.
Well, according to Alan Dershowitz, it can go to the Supreme Court, but apparently you have to go through first these other courts, but the Supreme Court is allowed to pick it up if they want to. But the other question I have for you, the judge, is that how about the idea of Juan Marchand not allowing one of the witnesses for the defense, Brad Smith, to testify that in fact it's not illegal to pay hush money. Apparently they wanted to bring him in. He's some kind of a high official, or was a high official in the election department, or whatever you call it. And he was going to testify that it's not illegal to pay hush money. But apparently the judge did not allow that. Do you feel that that's something that could be appealed as well?
I'm not as impressed with that being an appellate argument, because the actual, hush money was not the charge in this case. I think sometimes, that term was used so much through the course of this case that everyone was dubbing this case the hush money case, and that's not what it is. It's
Right, that wasn't the
falsification.
criminal charge.
Yeah, it's the falsification of the records. So I don't think that issue has viability.
I'm also on ABC News right now. They have some breakdowns of trying to fact check some things. And it says, at least in terms of that argument, it says, is what ABC News has to say. Smith was permitted to testify. The defense decided not to call him after Judge Merchan reaffirmed a pretrial ruling that limited what he could have spoken about. The defense did its case on Tuesday after calling 2 witnesses to testify, blah, blah, blah. Merchan said that if called, Smith could give general background about the Federal Election Commission, for example, its purpose and the laws it enforces, and provide definitions for terms such as campaign contribution. He rejected the Trump team's renewed efforts to have Smith define 3 terms in federal election law on the basis that doing so would breach rules preventing expert witnesses from interpreting the law. Nor could Smith opine on whether the former president's alleged actions violated these laws.
Could that be an angle for Trump to basically appeal on the basis of prosecutorial incompetence? Would that be a far-fetched angle for Trump to basically try and get out from under this? Because they didn't appear to a layman, and Ed knows better than I, that they defended them that well. I kind of felt like this was a touch and go jury to basically convince 12 people of his guilt. And I think his attorneys went up to the task personally. I mean, again, I'm not an attorney, but just my analysis of it. What do you think,
Well,
Judge?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I'm not going to opine. I think that Trump got a very competent defense in the case. And just to go back, I think Judge Marchand was correct in his ruling about the expert testimony. You're not permitted to give what we call a net opinion, which is in essence an expert coming in and says, in my opinion, the defendant is not guilty of the crime. That's not permitted expert testimony. So, when you look at the case, and it really is a documents type case.
Yeah.
And how much can you cross-examine the documents? How much can I just on the facts that were presented to this jury, and that would have been presented to any jury, no matter the venue. It was a strong case on the facts, and that's why the legal issues, the elevation of the misdemeanor to the felony and the charging of the jury, I think that's the defense avenue in this case. And I think that the defense attorneys, the trial attorneys, were well aware of that. This was not a weak case on the facts that were presented to the jury. It was a strong case, in my opinion. Can
we get back to, okay, what does all this mean? What does all this mean in terms of the 224, of the election? Where does this take us to?
Well, if I can make a comment, there was as we probably all know, Laurenti Beria, who was a Stalin's Himmler, he said to Stalin famously, I think that's one of the greatest quotes of the 20th century, "You bring me the man and I will find you the crime." So my so my concern is that this could be, as I might have said before, like a prelude to things to come, that in the future, people will be fishing for different crimes, quote unquote, and try to discredit different politicians through the legal system as opposed to in the polls. So that's what my concern is, going forward. And of course, the other issue is, how much it will help Trump and how much it will help Biden. It's because there are going to be people who say, I will never vote for a convicted felon. And conversely, there will be people who will say this was unfair. He was a victim, and that's the card that he already plays anyway. And how many people will go for that? So that's really the question, which nobody has the answer for.
Michael, can I make a comment on the Beria quote, which is great? It's a great one. You look at another character in history, a lot like Stalin, although Stalin probably killed more people. Al Capone. Al Capone probably killed hundreds of people, some by his own hand and some he ordered dead, and couldn't get him on a lot of stuff. And they finally got him on income tax evasion and sent him away. I find it somewhat ironic that this seemed to be the Achilles heel of Donald Trump. Yeah, he got it from this rather than what he's been stalling and putting off for years. I mean, the guy's led a charmed life when it comes to prosecutions. So he has been impeached twice. He's the first president, and he's the first president to be convicted of a crime. And God knows he's made a career out of playing the victim. So, which gives license to his followers because they feel victimized too. But so where does this lead us? Where does all of this lead us to November?
Well, Trump was correct about one thing, or at least half. Yeah, he was half correct. After the verdict, when he said that in essence, November 5th is going to be Judgment Day, and that's correct. I mean, that's not a profound statement, but that is correct. And where it leaves us is, I think it's a wash, but it may, to a very limited degree, help President Biden. But there's no way of really telling. The polls are all over the place, and honestly, the polling that takes place right after these events, I think you have to give the public some time to digest these events, and even the polling itself. I think we all, and maybe I shouldn't be speaking for all of it, I think we're all somewhat skeptical about this polling data that we see, but that's just my first impression.
I think unlike Trump's trials in the past, where he hasn't testified, although he's made a lot of bluster that he would, I think the proof comes in the pudding in June and September during those debates, because what the defense team basically feared was putting him on the stand. Now, whether he was true or not that he wanted to testify, no one's ever going to know that. But I think stripped naked on TV and left to his own devices is not a good thing for the Trump campaign.
The thing
Biden
is
also,
he can lie all he wants in the debates. in a trial, he can't get up there and just say whatever he wants. That was the problem with having him testify. In the debates, he's free to just say whatever he wants, and we kind of know the kind of things that he's going to say.
I think, interesting enough, he agreed to be cut off when his time was up, and that I kind of think he's going to help get his feet held to the fire by the moderators in terms of that. You know, so it should be interesting to see. I think the jury's out. I think it's a close race. I do think that independent voters are going to be more than, less likely to vote for him now that there's a conviction. I think the polling, even up to and through, has basically indicated that. I think it's baked in that Democrats are going to vote for Biden, and I think it's baked in that the Republicans are going to vote for Trump. And I don't think that they're going to waver in that. If anything, his base of support is solidified behind him, which there goes the law and order party. Well, if it ever was. So
I think also when it comes to the debates, it will also very much depend what Biden will look like. I mean, if he
pumped up on Adderall.
But, I was very, even though, as I said, I'm not a Biden supporter, I'm of course not a Trump supporter either, but, he appeared pretty good on the State of the Union. He spoke very clearly. I mean, even though whether you agree with the issues or not, he presented them pretty well. There were very few gaffes. He seemed relatively energetic. So I'm 100% sure he doesn't have dementia. He may have obviously a little bit of a cognitive loss, as anybody who is 81 would have. And, has some, if he maybe walking is not as great, but nobody is great at that age. But he seemed pretty good. So if he appears like that in the debates, then, he would have won half of the battle. That's what I think.
Michael, what do you make of Trump's state psychologically? I know it's a tough call to do that, but what you have termed Donald Trump as a narcissistic, malignant
narcissist.
Narcissist. I mean, is that a clinical term, or how do you come to, what evidence have you seen that basically categorizes him?
That's what I believe he is. And, any malignant narcissist will never admit anything that he has ever done wrong. So, you are his friend only until you say something against him, and then you become his enemy. He uses people only for his own benefit. So that's why almost everybody leaves him. He doesn't have really any loyal supporters other than maybe very, very few, like, Giuliani or somebody like that. But most people who initially were in his cabinet left. So I believe the malignant narcissism is definitely a diagnosis. Also, there is something called the Goldwater rule, where people have called Barry Goldwater gave him different psychiatric diagnoses. And then the Psychiatric Association said you should never diagnose anybody unless you actually do a clinical evaluation of that person. But I still I still believe that's what he has. That's my belief. That's why I would never vote for him, because he's mostly interested in himself, not in the country. He's not interested, he will give preference to himself than to, the needs of the country. That's how I look at it.
I want to come back. Bill, you said that he agreed to have his microphone cut off in the debates. And I just have to say, you really think if that actually happens, the next day he's not going to be going all over Fox News and Newsmax saying they cut off my microphone, it wasn't fair, they wouldn't let me speak, it was rigged against me?
I'm sure he would say that regardless.
Look how often he says in the civil trial in New York that he wasn't allowed to have a jury when it was his own legal team that didn't choose to have a jury in the case. And he comes out all the time and says that was because of it was rigged against me with this unfair judge.
Well, that's I guess that's why he should sue his attorneys. I mean, it goes through them like underwear anyway. And by the way, somebody mentioned Giuliani. I don't think Giuliani's on his team until he gets paid. I've never seen a faster descent from grace from being America's mayor to being just a clown. It's very sad. And at one time, the front runner of the Republican Party for the president in 2008.
What about Giuliani in his own case, taunting the Arizona court system that they wouldn't be able to find him to serve him with his indictment? And then they simply used the Zoom that he was using to taunt them to look at the real estate listings of his different properties and identify which one he was in to go serve him with his indictment.
You can run, but you can't hide.
The idea that Rudy Giuliani, who was once such an important prosecutor, is now like openly taunting prosecutors for doing their jobs is itself such an incredible, I don't even know what term to use, but such an incredible change from who he was or who we thought he was decades ago.
It's disgraceful.
Yeah, it is. It's a shame too. I have to say too, as an Italian American, I would have basically, given him a serious look at president because of the job he did in New York, and I had those feelings about him, regardless of being a Democrat or a Republican. Well, holy smokes, I don't know what happened to him.
Well, you should watch that movie Borat Part 2. The second. Did you see it?
Yeah, I will. I haven't, but I will.
I have. I've seen more of Rudy Giuliani in that movie than I care to know about.
His orders, he definitely has as well.
Why did he make it? Why did he do that to debase himself even further? I guess they paid him. He had to get paid, right?
I don't know. That's a good question because, this guy, Sacha Baron Cohen, makes it look like he's spontaneous, but I'm sure
he makes his films not letting people in on the fact that it's a movie, that he's playing a character. So unless he's kind of capturing real people's reactions to the absurd characters that he and his few cohorts play.
But then
I saw him with Dick Cheney way back when, and it was like amazing. I'm saying, why did Dick Cheney agree to this? And how did he basically get ambushed like this?
It is that he's playing a character, Sacha Baron Cohen, but he's capturing people's real reactions to this character. So
you would think if you are reasonably intelligent, you must know it must be something going on because there is a cameraman, who's filming you. So that you would do something like that if you were a public figure. That's there must be something wrong in your thought thinking. I mean, that you are being filmed, and I guess legally, if he's going to put you in a movie that anybody can see, you will have to probably sign some kind of a consent form.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that part works with Sacha Baron Cohen's work, but
yeah, but I don't think you are legally allowed to just put somebody on.
I would think that's true, that what you're saying is true. I'm not sure how that works.
In school, you can't take a picture, you can't videotape any students without a permission form from the parents. I mean, since they're minors, I mean, you can't use any image on social media that's advertising your school unless the parents approve it, and that in my career as a principal, that's been a big issue. We got to make sure these kids who don't have permission forms could never be in any of the group
Those
photos.
big group shots. Yeah, I used to run into that too, taking pictures of things.
Have we, look, I think the American public is going to weigh a lot of things. They'll weigh what the state of the country is by the time the election rolls around.
Let's be honest. If the price of gas goes down 25 cents between now and November, Joe Biden's getting reelected.
No, you know what? You know what? I can't believe you said that. I was just about to say the exact same thing.
It has gone down about a quarter, but New Jersey had that unique thing where the sales tax, road tax kicked in and raised the price, but it has descended to about 25% where it was about a month and a half ago.
Yeah, but I think that's a very good point that Joe made. it's going to come down to in some part, the way people perceive the situation about prices. And I don't even want to use the term inflation or deflation, because really the vast majority of people, including us for that matter, really don't understand the dynamics of those terms. But it's how people feel about what they're paying. And the one thing that hits them over the head, because they see it every time they pass a gas station, is the price of gas. And I'm sorry to say, I think that is going to be a factor. But I just want to go back to one thing you were saying, Billy, about the debates, about the mic being turned off. And I think what is a big advantage, not only to Joe Biden, but to the American public, is that there's going to be no live audience at these debates, because I find that to be a distraction.
Yeah.
And I think that should help overall, but I think it probably helps Biden more. But
Well, it's
keep up a crowd more.
his crowd basically tend to be more raucous and loud, which gives validity to what he's saying, and that's going to come across. It's more like propaganda than anything else.
Correct.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure that he's going to, if he is elected, there'll be a minister of basically publicity, or whatever you want to call him. He'll have his own Joseph Goebbels,
All right,
don't forget, we're entering into a new Reich.
Yeah, a united Reich.
From a very innocent man.
We are coming down to the end here because, as listeners know, we record this during my free period during the day, and that's coming to a close. So I want to give everybody a chance here with the last few minutes we have, just to offer their last thoughts on any of the topics that we talked about today. And Bill, I'll start with you, and we'll go around.
Well, I'm going to do a personality inventory to see if I'm a malignant narcissist. I'm going to basically do a self-diagnosis, but I appreciate Michael's point of view, and not that I'm going to go to him as a therapist, but I definitely going to do a self-evaluation. I just want to check my own psyche.
I'm pretty sure you've admitted before that you were wrong about things, so I think you're in the clear.
I know you, since I know you for many years, I will sign my name to the fact that you are not a malignant narcissist.
That basically puts me at ease. My own mental health.
You don't even have much of a self-analysis. I know you are not, because you basically admit you make mistakes sometimes.
Right.
So we are a little narcissistic in that we like ourselves and we believe in our points of view, but we also, the normal narcissist, if you like, admits that there are things they don't know, there are things they did wrong, and then they wish they did something else, and they care about other people. That's
maybe that's what I should do. That my Catholic school upbringing, bless me, Father, if I have sinned.
So write you a certificate. You are not a malignant narcissist.
Doctor, your last thoughts?
I think we all of us here are willing to admit that we don't know everything, and certainly we don't know what's going to happen between now and November 5th. So there could be a lot of surprises, and we're just going to have to, of course, be patient, and we'll see.
Yeah.
I just like to say it will be exciting times ahead, so I cannot wait. I hope I hope I'm not going to die before the November 4th or whatever it is.
I hope so too.
Michael, me too. I hope, don't stop spitting in the air. You know where that spit lands, right on your forehead.
If that's where we're setting the bar, is that we all don't die November 4th.
Yeah,
And I think we're in for some good times over the next few months, hopefully. But I think we're in for some exciting events in the next few months, and personally, I can wait. I'm okay with not seeing some of the things that are probably in store for us the next few months. But thank you all for joining us today. Listeners, as always, you can reach out to us with your thoughts or questions. You might even join our growing cast of characters here on Wigs for Wigs, but you can reach us at Wigs for Wigs, that is WIGSFORWHIGS @gmail.com. We always love hearing from you. There's plenty to talk about. So please do reach out to us with your thoughts and your questions. And we'll see you again soon for another episode of Wigs for Wigs. Take care, everybody.